Hello, everyone. Today I'm gonna explore another. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I started this chat to disseminate and share with the public some of the layers to the whole human approach in health and disease, and how a lot of factors anticipate what the person is experiencing, or group, or communities, or even across the globe. So, starting with focus on the central nervous system, and what other risk factors, protective factors, and differentiator factors that anticipate this a condition, allostasis, or bringing the balance to the biosystem's functionality and adaptability. That's the homeostasis, when the cell communicate as they supposed to. And every time I'm trying to peel one layer of you are wonderfully and you are fearfully and wonderfully made. We see the whole person in front of us. We see outside the box. We see what they wear, how they talk, how they behave. But with the drive behind all of this, that is the electrobiochemistry within, and it differentiates between your mood, your memory, your perception, your learning processing and capability and capacities, your sleep, your eating habits, it impact every single thing in your way of life or your quality of life. And in the previous videos, I discussed the epigenetics, immunity, and the correlation between asthma and allergies from this singular anticipation on the molecular level, in the stress response, immune response, or high intense reactive immune system, and in correlation with other factors, the psychosocial stress and others. Today and another, because we see the outcomes, we witness the outcomes, we experience the outcomes. But what are the processes that leads to these outcomes? That is why we would like to change the narrative between the patient and practitioner, the family and the care team, and how the dialogue can be restructured for better outcomes, and at the same time at the level of the understanding and facilitate complex informations and the jargon and things like that. But we would like to see certain things, certain biomarkers. So they just like you would like to write it down and say, I would like to learn more about that. I would like to know how it can impact my gut-brain axis, how it can impact my mood, my memory, my interpersonal relationships, my way of connecting and relating to one another. I came to understand that what we see, the negative emotions, is a huge part of intergenerational trauma, and it's a cascade passing from one generation into the other, because no one addressed or say why I am thinking that, why I have this perceived reality, perceived stress, or perceived threat, or why I hate, I envy. This is a human nature. We call it human nature, whether negative or positive or in between. The motives, the attitudes, the beliefs, it is a cascade of early patterns or early habits that have been passed from modeling, imitating, witnessing, experiencing. That is all for the survival mechanism and the activating the sympathetic and activating sympathetic response or autonomic response, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fiend. So we are having adaptability, or we're having coping mechanisms to deal with whatever overwhelm the central nervous system. And it started to the person started, or the individual started early in stages, early, like some hard realities start at 2 years old, and we differentiate between the type of personality and traits and attitudes, and what can be future perspective from specific behaviors, especially when it comes to the negative side of the human psyche. The human psyche shapes everything, and it maneuver around your physiology, your health and disease, your lifespan, your health span, quality of life, and the level of achievement, or the level of frustration or disappointment, or the pattern of selection to relationships, repeating specific cycles. In trauma language, we call it the vicious cycle. I call it the trauma bleeding. Means like it's, if it doesn't have the right system or the right approach, if you put a band-aid, it's still internally bleeding, so nothing will stop it. That will shorten the lifespan, and we lose lives. So, and trauma bleeding, it can have like the manifesto or the manifestation of the behavior that we see. It can be shocking. It can be unwanted or unwelcomed. It can lead to the adaptation to become the weirdo, to become the mismatch, to become the aggressive, the defensive, whatever. That is all trauma talks. That is all the conversation the body is saying. I have pain, I want to express it, and I want to adapt, or I want to take in whatever makes me feel I feel okay after that. Even it is a highly sympathetic response. It is the aggressiveness, the compulsive, irritable, agitated, all this autonomic nervous system. It accelerates your heart rate, your breathing, all these cellular mechanisms. You are putting your cell under stress and overconsumption of unwanted electrobiochemical processes that over, or on the long run, it will affect the gene expression. Your body endures a lot. However, it comes to a point to the breakdown when a specific formula in place and a specific circumstances, habits, patterns, what we call as behavior, it takes place, and then compromise for the biosystem or the allostatic state, and the presence of the condition. It is not happy for everyone for a place to be in. Having a common cold, this is part of the stress response. This is weakening at the beginning, weakening to the immune response. But repetitive common cold, it can lead to more complex cascades of diseases. So putting the immune response, putting the immune system under multiple inflammatory cascade, so that is not okay. And inflammation, I mentioned before, that is the one challenge in number one challenge on the clinical practice and research in academia in every single specialty that looking for a solution for cure, remission, or dampening the inflammatory cascades or the inflammatory response, especially when it comes with oxidative stress. And I mentioned before, we're going to come back to oxidative stress. You're going to see, and when I say in every video, I say when I'm talking about stress, not the one that I have exam, I have to go to here and there. However, accumulation, if you give it more attention, because the more you give attention to the reaction, the more your body thinks this is the norm. So the cell language is changing. So it is not like you are going to become the same every single day. You have to process. You have this mental processing. You have to have this neuromuscle that I understand that this is temporary. It is not the normal, but your brain doesn't understand or know it happens or not. It just is the feeling, the sensation from the peripheral nervous system and the input through the sensory system, and the somatic responses started to shape. So I'm starting to say, when I talk about stress, I'm talking about oxidative stress that is accompanied with severe electrobiochemical changes, and based on your genetic predisposition, if it is like that is the norm of the cell communication, or miscommunication or confusion for the cells, the zombies having a party started to activate other unwanted mechanisms inside the body. Children don't have the language to express their pain or their feelings or their emotions, but they need the modeling or the imitation for the positive modeling and the positive language, and how to process this in a safe and trusted space. And I mean spaces. And I mentioned before, it takes only one trusted adult can change the mechanisms of the electrobiochemistry of a child. The harm is being done. 20% of the population are vulnerable, subjective vulnerable, that they are being used, abused, neglected, or taking advantage of. That is on multiple level, from early childhood till their adulthood, and whatever survival mechanisms that they adapt. Because the body is meant from generation to generation to keep you alive for survival and to fight for life, and that is not a healthy state. If it is the norm for it is not living, it is surviving. So when a person is activating from the survival mode, that is when we say it impacts their decision, perception, relationships, and their life outcomes. Why we see others can achieve something and other not. Some resilience has a specific genetic predisposition, by the way. However, when we come to the oxidative stress and prolonged inflammatory response, or low grade and prolonged adversity, that is when the resilience gene is being silenced, and then it bring anxiety, depressions, and other psychiatric conditions. So everything is coded, everything is having a map in your body, and God knows exactly why he made it and what for he made it, for us, for survival, for living, for thriving, for enjoying the life, because he promised to give us life and life with abundance. So his promise is true, but the world has a different equation due to other factors. We call them the social determinant of health and the hierarchy of the social classes, social status, social socioeconomic status, the geopolitical tapestry or makeup, leading to conflict, leading to wars, leading to unending state of dehumanization to the life that God has created. So whenever you are, the survival mechanism can lead to alteration to the biosystems, but this is not a state of life. Some are predisposed to be perpetrators, and sometimes the survivor or the victim become the perpetrator because they want others to go through the pain, the thing that they lived. Nobody defended them, nobody was there for them, nobody wanted something good to happen in their life, and they felt it like they are betrayed by others and finally now by themselves. So self-betrayal, self-deception can occur. That is another part of the revenge, for the grief, for the reflection or the projection of the harm has been done unto them. However, there's this subtle ways of causing harm. It can go unnoticed because this is personality, this is their trait, this is human behavior. However, whatever deviate from the standard deviation from a statistic point of view, whatever deviate from the norm, the mean, the 0 point, and you have here negative or positive, whatever deviate from the curve, it is outliers. And these are the most either vulnerable or the most worry about population. So research is important to make us understand, to look at inside the box for specific mapping or matrices we would like to understand, and their presence, the gender, the age, and the ethnicity, the race. The demographic, it's so important to understand their demographic, their geographic, if either they are in the rural, urban, or suburban, or they are in mountains, like every single that programmed the cell for a specific survival mood and adaptation to the environmental or the ecology of the human life. Today I'm bringing another layer to the onion. We're peeling it piece by piece. It's a journey I have started since my own case to understand why my body is reacting like this, and I want to understand that life is so interesting thing to understand, and it's a huge priceless gift for everyone to have. And we should, as the mother gives birth to the child, that she gives life. But what we can do with this life, it's a whole different different mystery for me, because the first thing that the infants does is crying. Every one of us came to life with a cry, with a big cry. Is it understanding what exactly outside world looks like? And sometimes I wonder if the fetus or in the child in the womb see the other side of life and how, or both sides of life. I wonder, and this is like erase the ones that they came into the world, and they came with a cry, and this cry is making me out of stop, because we say human suffering is, some cultures say human suffering is the norm, people come to suffer. However, in all the testimonies and all the stories, suffering has its peak and it goes into stability and then comes again with a change. So the outcome of the law of the life is change. This means we'll go through peaks. I mentioned before, understand your peak and the slippery slope where you fall short, and then the stability, the flatten of the curve, or uh, life is okay, it's a normal day I'm going through. But what the change occur at the peak, that is when you, every single thing you didn't address um, address or like felt like it is trapped within your cell, it comes to the surface with the flooding of emotions, and normally they are negative emotions. And here we see like when people bump heads, lash at each other. They can be so defensive toward the people because they reminded them of places, faces, experiences, or unwanted experiences. Many build their guards, many build like their walls. They don't want anything to deal with human nature, and some are really explosive in front of people. So in their faces, they're just explosive. So it's all that trauma talk. This is all intergenerational trauma. However, I'm saying connecting my school is the chicken or the egg. This is all connecting to the pathophysiology and electrobiochemistry and its impact on the biosystems. So you are not a singular entity in this world. You are collecting information every single trillion second, and this information it's changing and interpreting and processing, and it's attached to all the patterns, other processes, coping mechanisms, familiarity, relevancy, a lot of other things that we call through cross culture or social psychology or developmental psychology. So this all type of psychologist says just to take a piece of everything. And I have the human anatomy and the the microbiology, the physiology. I had it also first, and the behavioral neurosciences from functionality and the neuroanatomy again. So here we go. So the understanding of the neurobiology of all the behaviors and how this I take, it is not a word, it is not an action, it is electrobiochemistry inside my body. So I have to take care of what I am allowing into my space, what am I giving attention to, and how I behave before, during, and after every event. That will give you a mirror or a reflection. Which state are you operating? So part of I mentioned is we are adaptable beings. We are adaptable for survival. We are like the reptilian mammalian brain, that is survival, that is tribal, that is I have to belong, I have to feel safe, and this creating this sense of agency. But when this sense of agency to do something, this is autonomic response and maybe fight flight, It leads to I want to escape from the inside because I'm not comfortable. I feel discomfort. What I am experiencing now, I don't have the language of it. And based on collectivistic or individualistic culture, that is a Western culture, collectivistic, that is the Eastern cultures. Am I allowed to express how I feel? How I feel? How I feel. You look now, they are teaching social emotional skills, but within a context that is different. The superficial or thing that what does it mean, that is not learning, and that is part of the recognition, like the facial of recognition. I feel your face, but within the context, how to manipulate and articulate and dissect exactly the internal processes happening. That level, I haven't seen it yet. Because what we see, if we started to give the concept at the age of 2 to 5, at 7 years old, scenario and context has to take place. Because this is this age, mostly, they have the language, they may be exposed to unwanted behaviors, but now from whatever age they have been exposed, they think this is the norm, so they are looking for the familiarity of this toxic behavior everywhere they go. This is the only thing they know. But when I shifted the paradigm into teaching the internal process is happening when this feeling comes, especially with negative emotions, with person, places, experiences, I have to give it a context. And then I say when, where, why, who, where, what. So I give a meaning to what is happening. And forming a meaning is coming late in adulthood, while it has to be taught from early childhood. Because what is the meaning of life? That life, searching for meaning, or you're looking for meaning, you're looking for purpose. And that brings me to the infant cry once they come to life. Are they happy or are they afraid? So sometimes we cry of happiness, that something good we couldn't expect. So our tears is our expression of happiness. Others express their tears in sadness. So it's within the context. What was the scenario is given within, so I can have this reaction or this action. So we come to the biases again. So when you first impression is not, yeah, but at least like 1 to 2 years to know a person, that's yes, that yeah, that's what they mean. And proximity is so important. So some culture embrace proximity, others not. So they like their distance and their respect for their personal place. Some like the proximity. So it depends on the context. But all this is changing your electrobiochemistry. It change your behaviors. What kind of behaviors are you try or seeking numbness, denial, escape, rejection, sublimation, whatever you are seeking, you are looking for something tangible, something to grip on, something to chew, something to hold on. You're looking for something to release or take you in a space different from what you are experiencing and bringing discomfort. So I'm gonna start another group of videos that about smoking. I mentioned inflammation. That is a challenge for all the scientific world because it's all what we see in chronic conditions. It is not only the level of inflammation that happen after the cold or like a cut or something. No, it is more deeper on biosystems, tissue integrity and damage. I'm stress, so inflammation, stress, number two. So I'm changing the list that we say the chronic conditions, and I say first inflammation. Treat inflammation, you have a healthy life. Inflammation, stress, what drives, and I am talking about stress, I am talking about oxidative stress. So a little state of complexity, it based on the matrix or the makeup of the individual and the age and the gender and the race, ethnicity, demographic, and all of things like that, and other lifestyles, level of education. A big list for that. So number three is smoking. Yeah, and if you ask any practitioner what is the most important behavior or habit I want to erase it from my life to have a healthy life, they're going to say smoking, because you are looking for something to numb the stress, to escape, to give you a sense of comfort, but it is a false sense of comfort. Because if it is a true sense of comfort, is gonna bring a long-term effect, not a short-term effect. Short-term effect, that is escape, that's temporary, that is adaptation for survival. So it is not a healthy adaptation. It's maladaptive. And adverse childhood experience, whatever, like ACEs scores or type of trauma occurred. And there is a 10 questions for ACEs quiz, or you see your score, and it is correlated with chronic conditions, what the person is predisposed to develop over the term of life. And I spoke now, it's not only genetic, it is epigenetics, it is the gene environmental interaction, and in environmental, internal and external environment. So I'm gonna do smoking, adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, and obesity. That is another global pandemic, obesity or overweight. Believe it or not, and my focus on female. So I love to go through the child and women health. If we care about them, we're going to care about the whole world. If we pay attention to what alter their homeostasis, we are going to understand how can we prevent early, and how can we bring a sort of balance or accommodation to what has happened to start the process and understand it piece by piece. So the alarm, yes, it reminds me I have to do something. So in a second, I am gonna turn off the alarm and come back. I am back. So here. So I'm gonna focus on obesity. Smoking, adverse childhood experiences, and obesity. As a global pandemic, we're gonna try to build some of the cellular mechanisms or some of the factors that contribute to the adipose biology or the fat cells biology or the the fat tissue biology. So I'm gonna only start with an overview as I promised here. So the intersection between smoking, adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, and obesity, with a special focus on female populations. I care about, as if we care about them, we're going to care about the whole society, whole community. So paying attention to this population is a priority, is not an option. A little bit here, smoking and adipose biology. Cigarettes smoking induce chronic adipose tissue inflammation number one in everything, via activation of toll-like receptors for nootropic factor kappa B and signaling in macrophages, increase the CCL2 and shifts in adipokine secretion, leptin and adiponectin, leading to impaired adipocyte differentiation and recruitment of a pro-inflammatory macrophages and T cells. In middle-aged women, specifically moderate smoking correlates with lower fasting leptin levels, potentially reflecting altered leptin sensitivity rather than appetite regulation per person. Smoking also disrupts the gut microbiome, which recent cohort studies linked obesity to metabolic dysfunction. Smokers show distinct microbial genera associated with adiposity metrics and obesity-related disorders. For example, like in diabetes. ACEs can become biologically embedded through long-term HB axis dysregulation. If we notice that, like every allostatic and excitotoxicity ratio or load, it is related to I go back to pro-inflammatory cytokines. I go back to HB axis dysregulation. I'll alter the cortisol dynamics. You're going to see it in oxidative stress. You're going to see it in pro-inflammatory, low-grade inflammation and chronic inflammation and other psychiatric and chronic conditions. It's repeated that the alteration of HB axis or dysregulation alter the cortisol dynamic and it changes in DNA methylation. There is an histone modifications in stress regulatory genes. We discussed it about the neuro disorders. So they're coming back. It's a cascade. It's a cascade. Impairing emotions regulation, promoting inflammation, and altering metabolism. The mechanisms included epigenetic silencing or dysregulation of glucocorticoids receptor gene, leading to protracted stress response and metabolic sensitivity, like insulin resistance, visceral fat disposition. A cellular and molecular mechanism relating to smoking adipose biology and adverse childhood experiences and epigenetic programming. So I mentioned before, as the introduction, that the cigarette smoking exerts profound effect on adipose tissue biology by triggering chronic inflammation and disrupting normal adipocyte function. One key pathway involves the activation of toll-like receptors on adipose tissue macrophages. Toll-like receptor for activation initiate downstream signaling via nuclear factor kappa B or NF kappa B, and transcription factor pivotal in inflammatory response. This cascade promote the secretion of pro-inflammatory responses. This cascade promote the secretion of pro-inflammatory chemokines such as chemokine CC motif, ligand 2 CCL2, which recruits additional macrophages and T cell to the adipose microenvironment, perpetuating inflammation. Leading to inflammatory cell recruitment. Smoking shifts the balance of adipokine secretion, hormones secreted by adipocytes that regulate metabolism and immune function. Smoking increases leptin, a pro-inflammatory adipokine, and decreases adiponectin or anti-inflammatory adipokine. Disrupting adipocytes differentiation and function. This altered adipokine mellow contributes to insulin resistance, impaired lipid metabolism, and increased visceral fat disposition, all hallmarks of obesity-related metabolic dysfunction. In middle-aged women, moderate smoking has been associated with lower fasting leptin levels. This paradoxical finding suggests that smoking may alter leptin sensitivity, the ability of leptin to regulate appetite and energy expenditure, rather than simply suppressing appetite. Reducing leptin sensitivity can contribute to dysregulated energy balance, promoting obesity despite lower circulating leptin level. And this all lead to the miscommunication between with pro-inflammatory and high and the chronic inflammation and the oxidative processes. The cell confuse, and then the replication of the same thing occur, or replication of aggregation of the fat cells occur. Moreover, smoking profoundly affects the gut microbiome, which plays a critical role in metabolic homeostasis. Recent cohort studies demonstrate that smokers possess a distinct gut microbial profile characterized by altered abundance of genera linked to adiposity and metabolic disease such as metabolic dysfunction, associated steatotic liver disease, and type 2 diabetes. This dysbiosis exacerbates systemic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction, further linking smoking to obesity pathogenesis. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, can become biologically embedded, causing long-lasting effect on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and stress regulation. Chronic stress exposure during critical development windows leads to dysregulation of cortisol secretion and epigenetic modification, including DNA methylation and histone post-translational modifications in genes involved in stress regulation. One will characterize the mechanism in the epigenetic silencing or altered regulation of the glucocorticoid receptor NR3C1 gene, which encodes the receptor mediating cortisol feedback inhibition of the HB axis. Hypermethylation of NR3C1 promoter region leads to reduced receptor expression, resulting in prolonged stress response and elevated cortisol level. This all leads to the confusion of the cellular communication. This protracted cortisol exposure fosters a chronic long-grade inflammation, insulin resistance, preferential visceral fat accumulation, thereby increasing obesity risk. And this over time, leading Parkinson's, Alzheimer, and other neurodegenerative and neuro disorders. Beyond the NR3C1, epigenetic changes also affect other stress-related genes like FKBPS5 and the metabolic pathways, impairing emotional regulation and energy balancing. These molecular alterations establish a biological framework whereby ACEs predispose individuals to obesity and metabolic disease through lifelong neuroendocrine and inflammatory dysregulation. From the integration between smoking, adverse childhood experiences, obesity, and at the biochemical, epigenetic, inflammatory, and hormonal level, like acid dynamic, forming ascendemic or that disproportionately affect long-term physical and mental health. So if we understand that everything, one of the requirements I do appreciate that we see in the world around us and in the world of health and disease is metabolic management, regulation, and understanding from entry level health education. So I am not teaching about the disease. I'm teaching about the processes that leads to the disease and how can I prevent this from early screening, early intervention based on age, gender, race, ethnicity, and at the same time their medical history, if found, their family history, and the intergenerational trauma, and their ACEs score. Sometimes the ACEs score can come with like a healthy person. They are not, they have the resiliency gene, so they can operate under pressure or under stress. My talk about the 20% and the 60% of female subject vulnerable, those who are having the dysregulated central nervous system. Dysregulated nervous system, that is immunity, that is their emotional dysregulation and their sympathetic response and the allostatic state. So and that is my calling. We would like to teach metabolic health, not the disease, because the disease is going to be like that. That is the label it's has been given. But what are the processes leading? What drives? All the time I say, what drives all of that? We look at the driver. The vehicle is designed to be with a specific function. But what it changed this this compartment or this this vehicle it changes. It's like functionality, endurance, adaptability, a lot of processes. It gets aging. It's a sync. Even every device you are buying now has its synchronicity. It's how to connect through the Wi-Fi. They have a brain, the World Wide Web. So they have this 5 gigas and the trillion of terabytes of information. So your device is taking one piece of your operating systems. So how about the whole human? So we would like to understand when all these functions come in place, what is the metabolic process occurring? And accommodating or associating with emotions, with context. Give a context, give a scenario. Drama can be a role play can be a huge facilitator in teaching the context for early childhood. How can we create the time for going through scenarios as a family, as a group, as a community, and we understand what metabolic mechanisms has been altered or has been already balanced? That needs a whole shift in how we understand the functionality, the mechanisms, and the articulation in health and disease. What are the integration between all of that? So I see here smoking and chronic stress from ACEs both lead to elevated oxidative stress, marked by overproduction of reactive oxygen species, ROS, and depletion of antioxidants. These are the fighters, the defenders for to make the inflammation intact, like dampen it. But unfortunately, with smoking and chronic stress from ACEs, exposure to trauma or experiencing trauma or witnessing even trauma, elevated oxidative stress, so it's metabolically changing your biochemistry, marked by overproduction of reactive oxygen species, ROS, and depletion of antioxidants like glutathione and superoxide dismutase. And they are the same biomarkers, they are the same metabolic mechanisms in asthma and allergies. So inflammatory diseases, they are what is the drive? What is the metabolic? When I mention the metabolic, I would like to look for the excitotoxicity ratio and the oxidative stress and the allostatic load. I don't want to see the mineral, the vitamins, and this is with health management for the healthy person. For healthy person, but for compromised biosystem, I want to look for the zombies. I want to look for the excitotoxicity loads. I want to look at that. I want to shift the paradigm. We have to speak about the excitotoxicity ratio and where the person is at, and which how they are operate through this, how it impacted their mood, their perception, their memory, their aging processes. Now you see, I mentioned Parkinson's. It started early in mid-20s in the gut. So how can we mitigate this with the changes in the microbiome and the gut? In the gut lining or the endothelial tissue health, your vascular health, all of that. These oxidative changes damage adipocytes, endothelial cells, and DNA, laying a foundation to metabolic disease. So your genetic makeup or the matrix is being decoded, so presenting new factors or new layers or new mechanisms, and the body want to deal with that, and it is too much to be taken in. Smoking increases lipid pre-oxidation, impairs the mitochondria function in adipose tissue. That is your powerhouse, that is your energy, that is your performance, that is your attention, that is your willingness to do the task without feeling exhausted, fatigued, depleted, drained, all of that. Without feeling like the sleepless during the day and the disruption of your sleep cycle. And promotes adipocytes insulin resistance. And although Alzheimer is insulin resistance, allergies, insulin resistance, asthma, allergies, it's what state animal protein increase secretion of insulin. If the liver became overloaded, they refuse. So they promote, if the brain receptors didn't receive overwhelmed as well and refuse to take insulin, that when the overload comes to the tissue bodies, to the muscle, to everything, to your biosystem, and then you develop the insulin resistance. So your body doesn't want to take it anymore. And that present allostatic load on the biosystems. Who's going to take it? And who is going to work harder, the kidney or the lung or the heart? So who's going to work harder? Who's going to take the load from their fellow liver and their fellow brain, because they are overloaded and they cannot take any more of this? So we are overconsumption of the biosystem with whatever load is being metabolized. ACEs raise basal metabolic demands via hyperactivation of the hypothalamic adrenal medullary, or SAM, axis and HB axis, which elevates circulating glucose and insulin levels, all in the body. Metabolic dysregulation increased fat storage, especially in the visceral, and reduce the energy expenditure, fueling obesity. Overload, too much of, is gonna find wherever escape is gonna be in your shoulders and your thighs and first it's abdomen and the abdominal. So this belly fats, that is the first location for the adipose storage. Then your arms, and then your back, and then your thighs. So they find wherever escape is, so they can be stored. And the body is saying, okay, I'm gonna go on a starvation, store. Both, or too much, store. Your body is trying to protect you, unfortunately. Both smoking and ACEs initiate epigenetic modifications that reprogram gene expression in key systems governing metabolism, stress, and immunity. That is your body language, how the body is trying to process and how to function or adapt. So exposure to ACEs, the target gene is NR3C1, FKPP5. Epigenetic mechanism is DNA methylation, hypermethylation. The outcome of that is glucocorticoid and resistance, prolonged stress response. Smoking targeted genes AHRR, F2RL3, CYP1A1, and this is a hypermethylation, outcome inflammation, carcinogenesis, this cancer, altered detoxifications. So you have this excitotoxicity load. Obesity targeted genes BPARG, ADIPOQ, in histone acetylation and DNA methylation, outcome impaired adipocyte function, altered insulin signaling. Every video I mention, the cells are confused like children, like the group, like what's going on in? There's lots of confusion. So the cells that don't understand what they do, they are gonna aggravate by in their own, like cancer cells. They're gonna multiply on their own. They're gonna create their own symphony. So we understand that this load, this toxic load, has been taken a while since early childhood. However, it hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been brought to attention how the body, how the biosystem function from molecular and cellular level. What are the metabolites, that the good ones and the bad ones, and what activate the bad guys? Our focus has to be on the bad guys from preventive approach. These epigenetic marks are biologically embedded, particularly during sensitive developmental windows, childhood. As I said before, like from 0 to 5, there's a lot of pruning. This is the neurosynaptic UHB axis, neuroendocrine system. There's the microchip is being shaping by your environment. At adolescent, pruning happen again, and whatever experiences they have been exposed, whatever alteration to the HB axis, or hyperactivity of HB axis, or hypoactivity of HB axis, hippocampal, amygdala, and the insula, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and other regions, the tegmental area, other regions that already are here to make connections, to understand the functionality of your body and to assist you. But when we confuse them with wrong messaging and wrong communication, the wrong outcomes is being manifested in health, in the allostatic, or the existence of the condition. And it can persist across the lifespan, even transgenerationally, because what has been passed for the mother, passed to the parents, passed to their offsprings. If it's not addressed, it is passed to other offsprings, and it is cyclical. It is not one thing and done. The triad of smoking, ACEs, and obesity synergetically promotes a state of chronic low-grade inflammation. And when we address neurodegenerative diseases, we have to identify the role of low-grade inflammation in all of this, and the histamine and the glutamate pathways. A non-contributor to insulin resistance, arteriosclerosis, and depression. In arteriosclerosis, that is the endothelial rupture and the fibrosis, leading to strokes. And cardiovasculars, of course, so the alteration of the human pi systems, or the rupture or damage of the cell tissue. For the inflammatory biomarkers, we have the C-reactive protein. It's a hepatic response to interleukin 6, a pro-inflammatory cytokine. Predicts cardiovascular risk and obesity. So CRP, or C-reactive protein, that is inflammatory biomarker. It is activated by the hepatic response of interleukin 6 and predicts cardiovascular and interleukin 6 in Parkinson's as well. As I remember right now, predicts cardiovascular risk and obesity. Interleukin 6, released by adipocytes, macrophages, drives the hepatic CRP production. So it's cyclical. Once the cell said, oh, it happens every time, so I know it. Repeat. Tumor necrosis factor alpha, secreted in adipose and immune tissue, insulin resistance, and cachexia. CCL2, MCP1 chemokine induced by toll-like receptor 4 and nuclear factor kappa B recruits macrophages to adipose tissue, because that is what now is the normal for cell communication, aggravating more pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines. Leptin increase, adiponectin decrease, smoking and obesity linked imbalance, leading to the metabolic syndrome inflammatory adipokine profile. Smoking activates toll-like receptor 4 and nuclear factor kappa B, driving pro-inflammatory cytokines expression in adipose tissue. ACEs potentiate inflammation through long-term cortisol dysregulation and immune cell programming. Obesity added to the fire. You put wood to fuel to the fire. With dysfunctional adipocytes becoming a major source of inflammatory mediators. So if we understand that allergy is inflammatory metabolic disease, asthma is inflammatory metabolic disease, metabolic dysfunction, obesity. So we're going to go to the core of what has been driving these responses. Both ACEs and smoking dysregulate hormonal axis, especially HB axis and autonomic nervous system. That is fight, flight, freeze, in ways that amplify obesity risk. HB axis dysregulation in ACEs, baseline cortisol increase, diurnal variation decrease, visceral leading to visceral adiposity and insulin resistance. Chronic high cortisol downregulates NR3C1 glucocorticoid receptor, blunted the consequences, blunted feedback loop, persistent stress response, and dysregulation of the cortisol, activation of the adipocytes inflammatory response. Smoking and early trauma increase sympathetic tone, increase norepinephrine, and reduce vagal tone. That is heart rate variability. Impairing energy regulation is sleep and emotion regulation. So look at your cellular mechanism, understand your cellular function on molecular and cellular mechanism. We are not looking at the disease, we are looking what drives it. What drives it? Low vagal tone correlates with elevated inflammatory markers and poor appetite, satiety signaling. Sex hormone modifier in women. Estrogen modulates leptin sensitivity, fat distribution, and immune response. with menopause, with estrogen decrease, we see it's easy for some who are predisposed to gain weight after menopause. Postmenopausal women reduce the estrogen, exacerbate inflammatory and metabolic dysregulation associated with smoking and ACEs. So trauma it leaves its biological imprint. It doesn't go away. It can fade, but however, whatever environmental factors, whatever triggers, whatever the level of tolerance that the person has been reached, it will determine their metabolic activation and the chemokines, the cytokines dysregulation. ACEs and smoking leading to the HB axis dysregulation and toll-like receptor for activation, epigenetic reprogramming, NR3C1, AHRR, FKBP5, chronic inflammation, interleukin 6, CRB, tumor necrosis factor alpha, CCL2, hormonal imbalance, cortisol, leptin, estrogen, metabolic dysfunction, and obesity. The multidimensional pathway highlights how early life stress, ACEs, and lifestyle factors like smoking are not independent, but mutually reinforcing systems that epigenetically and physiologically amplify obesity risk, particularly in vulnerable populations like women with trauma exposure. So if you see in the body image stigma, and there is a researcher just I was going through a research paper. I was going through how the negative perception on toward obese or obese or overweight patients. So that is a research paper is by Fall et.al. Weight bias among professionals treating eating disorders, attitude about treatment, and perceived patient outcomes. So the focus in how to approach challenging disorders, like the eating disorders, for example. And they have direct correlation between ACEs and inflammatory response, or the chronic inflammation, or the drive of the chemokines, the cytokines, and the metabolic dysfunction. So it is a long history. If the person is presenting with obesity at their 40, 50, or 30, so there is a history of 30 years of probably unresolved trauma and oxidative stress that has been putting this miscommunication on the cellular level. So it requires a different perspective. That is not that the person wanna be. Sometimes gaining weight happens automatically even with eating less. But the change in the cellular mechanism, that what needs that deeper look at, with especially with insulin resistance, serotonin resistance, and other resistant mechanisms within the cellular function or mechanisms. So it requires a different perspective. It is not they are lazy. It is not they don't want about the effort, but what drives the behavior is more than what you see or what is presented. So it requires a more deeper look on the social, psychosocial approach. We call it from biopsychosocial. But if we have presented by the biomarkers or the biologic system functionality and their allostatic perspective, what drives all of that? Is it internal or external? Is the cell now think that this is the norm and it leading to complications for the endothelial rupture and lipopolysaccharides and increase of the adipose proliferation. So we would like to understand a deeper level of what drives the conditions, rather than stigmatizing or blame shifting or calling them they don't want to change. There are more to the processes than what everyone is seen or said. Many times the comments and the words and the judgmental approach of others, it can worsen the outcomes of the patient. Oxidative stress, once again, and the healthy behavior or the unwanted behavior would like to change is smoking, ACEs, and obesity. So we see the obesity. What drives all of this? It's a whole different complex, and it is different from what one treatment can. Some population with a specific biomarkers can respond, but others cannot, because I have to address the trauma piece. I have to address the environmental triggers. I have to address their tolerance span, their hypothalamic functionality, and alteration of the hippocampus. So all of this requires different modalities for understanding how best we understand to mitigate the harm. Oxidative stress and the imbalance in the production of reactive oxygen species and the body antioxidants defenses, resulting in cellular and molecular damage. It has a central role in the pathophysiological of the triad of smoking, adverse childhood experiences, and obesity. As I mentioned before, the biomarkers like ROS, MDA, 8-OHDG, that's a DNA oxidation marker, leading to genomic instability and epigenetic mutation risk. NOx enzymes, NAD, DBH oxidase, ROS generating enzymes often upregulate by inflammation, chronic oxidative load. For the glucocorticoid and cortisol ratios here, reduced oxidized glutathione ratio, depletion of antioxidant reserve. SOD converts superoxide into hydrogen peroxide. Antioxidants defense often downregulate under stress. Catalase or GPX, glutathione, detoxify hydrogen peroxide, decrease the activity and vulnerability to oxidative stress. Cigarette smoke contains over 17 oxidants per puff, including free radicals and reactive aldehydes. It activates NOx enzymes and directly damages DNA, lipid, and proteins. Upregulate ROS, damage endothelial and adipose tissue, increases the risk of atherosclerosis and insulin resistance. Smokers show significantly elevated levels of MDA and 8-OHDG and reduced glutathione. Um, Early life stress programs the HB axis toward the cortisol hypersecretion, which increases mitochondria ROS production and inflammation. Trauma exposed individuals show increase in oxidative DNA damage markers like 8-OHDG, a decrease in antioxidants enzyme expression, for example, catalase and GPX. This stress-induced oxidative load contributes to neurodegeneration, metabolic inflexibility, and chronic disease risk. So when we're talking about the inflammation, what drives oxidative stress, what drives smoking, its outcome on the activation of the pro-inflammatory cytokines and the oxidative stress and the rupture of the vascular and the tissue damage. We see obesity is characterized by adipose tissue hypoxia, immune cell infiltration, and increased mitochondria ROS production. Dysfunctional adipocytes and macrophages in obese tissue release tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 6, and other cytokines, activate NOx, and produce ROS. Oxidize LDL perpetuates vascular injury and insulin resistance. Obese individuals have higher MGA protein carbonyl 8-OHDG and lower SOD GSH glutathione and GPX activity. Combined impact between smoking, ACEs, and obesity, ROS production from multiple processes, smoking, cortisol dysregulation, adipocytes stress, reduce the antioxidant reserve, glutathione depletion, increased inflammation, which further stimulates ROS production. As we see, it can be easily seen in cancer patients. Epigenetic instability, mitochondria damage, and telomerase attrition. And telomerase, this is the caps on your DNA, and the shortened attrition of the telomerase means the shorten of the lifespan. For the cardiovascular oxidative stress impact the endothelial dysfunction, hypertension, atherosclerosis, metabolic insulin resistance, beta cell dysfunction, type 2 diabetes, neurological mood disorders, neurodegeneration, impaired emotion regulation. You see this agitated, irritated, hypervigilant, disruptive behaviors, all this oxidative stress consequences. Autoimmunity, chronic inflammation, epigenetic, DNA methylation errors, histone modification, dysregulation. Another factor and important, inflammation, driven by oxidative stress, increase the rupture or the damage in the adipose protein, and vascular health, leading to disruption in the neuroendocrine system and sleep disturbances. So your Chemical disruption alters your sleep patterns, habits, duration, and it can lead to sometimes exposure for the high stress, high exposure to high stress environment can lead to sleep deprivation and sleep disturbances, and leading and cooperating in obesity as well. Sleep deprivation and poor sleep quality are central mediators and consequences of trauma, obesity, and substance use, like smoking. Sleep loss does more than cause fatigue. It contributes to neuroendocrine dysfunction, inflammation, metabolic dysregulation, and even epigenetic changes. ACEs and sleep dysregulation. Exposure to trauma during childhood, especially emotional and sexual abuse, is associated with long-term disruptions in sleep architecture and insomnia risk in adulthood. Trauma exposed individuals often show low slow wave and REM sleep, high nighttime awakenings and hypervigilance, high sleep latency, time to fall asleep. So there is a delay in falling asleep. Chronic HB axis activation, elevated cortisol at night. Your cortisol level has to be high in the morning to keep you awake. And one of the biological processes, it's cultural and habitual or behavioral things that we took from the things like so here, when there is a book, Dopamine Nation. I have to bring this book. It's a very good book. The drug of a choice, and it's let me search it. The drug of a choice, Dopamine Nation, because it left me like, oh wow, that is. We take things for granted. We do it because we see many people do it, so we just do it. So we don't think about the metabolic health over time when we adapt these behaviors or routines or habits. That common sense is not part of the culture as well. You have to be like a specialized or a high level of something, so you can understand these things. But how about the layperson? How about the most suffering people, the most suffering, and the have a high chronic pain, and it is a long time. Those who thought that they are helpless, they cannot do anything on their own, and that is what it is. And that is a negative outcome of not being aware of what exactly life means and what metabolic function and dysfunction means on the long run for lifespan and health span. Let us see that Dopamine Nation. One of the books is really interesting. It is written by one of wonderful psychiatric. Dopamine Nation. Because she stated that the drug of a choice. The Dopamine Nation. Let me see that. Yes, Dr. Anna Limbeck. Dr. Anna Limbeck. She is a psychiatrist. I loved when we study the mechanisms of addiction and the elongation of the dendrites and synaptic connections, and how this impact on the communication, how the behavior impact on the behavior, and why many are misjudged when they are misunderstood, mistreated, stigmatized, all of that. It is tough. So she mentioned that the drug of choice, even coffee, sugar, sweet, of a choice, whatever it is. And she described the brain chemical underlying this addictive behaviors. Going back to my point, if you would like, I'm gonna put it in my chat, the dopamine nation, to see the swing between pain and pleasure. So you have more pain, you seek pleasure. The pleasure time is shortened, the pain accelerate, and the vicious cycle happen in food addiction. Whatever you are, a media addiction, it is she's treating very tough conditions as a female doctor. Her specialty very I owe all honor and respect for who challenged to study specific behavior on the opposite sex. And they understand the person or the human in front of them, because they understand that the electrobiochemical mechanisms is happening within the person. And this book taught me to be humble, to be open to learning. And what I know is little. We know a sparkle of the truth. We don't know all the truth. We don't know all the facts. We learn as we search, as we try to understand. We seek understanding. We learn as we go. And this is human life, and this is a human condition. It can take a whole like world of scientists, practitioner, a specialist, lay persons. Everybody's interested in the human condition and interested in the value of life. They pay attention to specific perspectives that contribute to health and disease, and how can we make the life a better place. So it is based on the interest. I'm gonna put this book title in the chat, and if you are interested, you may have a look at it. You're gonna be humbled when you uh, all the sharing after informed consent, and everything is seen from the perspective of the human. And as we try to adapt and numb and what drives the behavior, the pain and pleasure swing, the justice scale, the pain and pleasure. Your cortisol level has to be high in the morning, so you can it can bring attention and awakening, and you can function through the day. So you get up, you do whatever you want to do, so you start your day. And then it dampens, supposed to be like through the day, it dampens, and then the adenosine and the melatonin is spiked. So they based on your sleep awake cycle or circadian rhythm, or your biological clock function. So another state comes into, or mechanism comes into place, so you can feel asleep and you go through the stages of sleep. And the most important, when everything really good take place and everything is sorted and cleansed, and then this is the REM sleep. That is the deep cycle of sleep. And each stage take the stage 1, 2, 3 takes 90 minutes, means hour and a half. It depends how many hours you are need, or your circadian rhythm or sleep awake clock, because it sometimes has a genetic predisposition. Some need 4 hours, or they function really well. 5 to 6 hours function really well. Some are from 7 to 8. Some from 7 to till 9, 10, 12, 13, 14. So it depends on, that's why everyone, their mood and sleep regulate mood, you regulate attention, regulate your parasympathetic sympathetic response. It is a restorative state of your biological system. So when God made us sleep, that he made it to restore your biosystem, the mechanisms that are working 24/7 for you. But at nighttime, so at daytime, they are digesting, they are metabolized for certain things for the intake. But for the sleep, now we need to filter, we need to cleanse, we need to restore, we need to repair. That's when cell repair occur as well. So sleep is important. Humans spend a third of their life sleeping, 2/3 are working. Imagine the stress that is putting on your cellular mechanisms through all these stages. So everything, every biological, if electrobiochemical process, it has a function, it has a purpose, it has a meaning to present to the person you are. And over 5 years to 10 years, you have a whole different person. But what matters, your inputs. What matter, your input. Are you influencing your predisposition? Or are you saying, I am not my genes, I am not what happened before, I am gonna change this from now on? And this is with intention, determination, awareness, and absolutely priority for what matters, what needs to fill my cup, so I can bring this life, so I can feel alive, so I can be around. I can be around in places, work. Yeah. And what are my limitations? And there is respect for these limitations. What are my boundaries? And respect for these boundaries. So it is not just like you are acting out of something. No, everything was intention, was focus, was purpose, was meaning. So you can feel the life. God created a life for a purpose. God created everything and say it's good. That is aha moment. That is an oh moment of the joy of creation. So you have a piece of that. Imagine you have a piece of that. That is a treasure. That is a wonder. That is a blessing, and it's an endless blessings. But unfortunately, many things has disrupted this beauty. We say he created beauty from ashes, but when you understand it, you are going to have first grace on yourself, and you are going to see everything around you and say, is it worth it? So whatever is worthy, I'm walking through it. Whatever is adding value into my life, I am walking through it. So choice, you do have a choice with what you can, with whatever you have, whenever you are. Understand the value of life. You're going to understand the value of every single breath God has created within you. That is huge. That is an moment for me. Like God, with the suffering, with the trials and tribulations, we go through the motion. We are not aware. There is a trauma talk. There is a trauma bleed. There is unhealthy patterns and unhealthy behaviors. There is humans can go into wrong relationships, systems, all of things. So that's to say that is the lack of awareness of the role of intergenerational trauma and its impact on health and disease. And I am dedicated all these videos to understand or peel the onion, the layer of the human condition, and understand that you are not a singular mechanism. You are complex. God didn't make you easy. He made you complex. He didn't make you easy. If we're easy, oh my goodness, that is gonna be like the life of the party that everybody know. I understand everything, I know everything. So what is the purpose of life? You have something to work on. You have a mystery to unsolve. You have to solve, or you have a problem to work on to bring something can benefit those who may are touched with it. You never know. Nobody knows. So you are work in progress, but making a promise yourself to bring healing, that is with awareness, that is step one. So the alteration of the HB axis, elevated cortisol at night, delayed sleep onset, and fragmentation. Nicotine is the central nervous system stimulant, increasing sleep latency, decreasing REM sleep, and REM sleep when all the repair occur, and increasing in nocturnal awakenings, lower sleep efficiency, time of asleep, time in bed, nighttime nicotine cravings and withdrawal related awakenings. Nicotine withdrawal in cessation trials is also associated with REM rebound, vivid dreams, and disrupted circadian rhythm. Obesity is strongly associated with obstructive sleep apnea, intermittent hypoxia, and sleep fragmentation due to airways collapse. Obstructive sleep apnea is more common in central obesity and associated with daytime hypersomnolence, poor memory and mood disturbances, increase the cardiovascular and metabolic risk. So cortisol, HB axis activation inhibits sleep onset and REM sleep, leading or associated with chronic chronic in ACEs and obesity. Sympathetic tone, neuroepinephrine and adrenaline, arousal, fragmented sleep, heightened in smokers and trauma survivors. Melatonin, impaired circadian entrainment, affected by nicotine, obesity, and stress. Increased interleukin 6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha and C-reactive protein, pro-inflammatory cytokines disrupt, slow wave sleep, elevated in all three conditions. In obesity, sleep apnea, and cardiovascular. Leptin and ghrelin increase hunger, especially in high calorie foods, comfort foods. So you see the person's eating, so excessive caloric intake, leading to excessive calorie or a high energy storage, leading to driving the inflammatory and adipocytes aggregation, triggered by sleep loss and contribute to obesity. The sleep deprivation impairs the prefrontal cortex function, poor impulse control, mood dysregulation, and emotional reactivity. Traumatized or sleep deprived individuals show hyperactive amygdala hyperactivity, lower cognitive control over cravings and stress. So less tolerance, intolerance to hunger, and intolerance with stress. These neural shifts may increase smoking relapse risk and promote emotional eating. Sleep loss modifies DNA methylation in circadian clock genes, BER1, CRY1, and metabolic genes, LEB, and INSR. Poor sleep reduces insulin sensitivity, elevates cortisol, and disrupt growth hormone release, all leading to increased fat accumulation, especially in the abdomen, the belly fats. Sleep-deprived individuals also show telomere shortening, suggesting accelerating biological aging. So this self-perpetuating cycle shows how trauma, substance use, that's smoking, and sleep interact to exacerbate each other, necessitating integrated treatment approaches. So we have nicotine replacement therapy with careful sleep hygiene. Support improves the cessation success. CPAP treatment in obstructive sleep apnea in obese individuals can improve insulin sensitivity and mood. Mindfulness-based intervention reduce both insomnia, severity, and cortisol levels. Let us see from epidemiological and risk relationships between ACEs and obesity. In 2024 meta-analysis, 46 studies, hundreds of thousand participants reported ACEs exposure increase of adult obesity by roughly 48%. The effect was notably stronger in females for physical abuse, sexual abuse, and psychological abuse. Abuse is not only emotional and psychological response, it is a physiological response. It's a change in the metabolic function. Earlier views, including cross-sectional studies, reported for roughly 46% increased obesity odds with multiple ACEs and proposed plausible mechanisms via chronic stress, emotional dysregulation, and disrupted eating behavior. A childhood obesity review in 2021 found the girls may be more sensitive to ACEs-related obesity, especially sexual abuse, and noted that effects may range between 2 to 5 years after exposure. It's not what happened, it's what will happen after the event, what it changes, what change took place. ACEs exposure is strongly associated with increased lifetime risk of smoking and other substance use in pooled meta-analysis of 102 studies. In Hawaii, cohort of women increased the ACEs count was associated less than or equal to 5, associated with much higher prevalence ratio, smoking, overweight, obesity, in obesity rates, or a risk factor, or activation of the predisposition. Differentiational factors in female variability. We say risk factors, preventive factors, and differentiation factors. Women generally more prone to central visceral obesity, that is the abdominal and the thighs and upper body and lower body obesity, influenced by hormonal changes, but smoking obesity association are weaker in female versus males, suggesting sex hormones and adipose distribution differences play a larger role in women. Obese pre or post-menopausal women have different sympathetic nervous system activation versus men, with pre-menopausal women showing less activation tied to visceral fat, while post-menopausal women begin to resemble male patterns of fat storage. Resilience, positive parental bonding, emotional regulation skills, trauma-informed care may buffer the obesity risk trajectory following ACEs. Physical activity and exercise induce beneficial epigenetic changes, including methylation shifts in metabolic and inflammatory genes that can counteract stress and obesity-linked pathways. ACEs elevate risk of smoking, especially in women, via mechanisms such as emotional dysregulation, trauma coping behaviors, altered stress responses. Smoking may contribute to altered adipose function via inflammation, leptin, adiponectin disruption, altered microbiome, and though smokers often have lower BMI initially, they develop metabolic dysfunction that predisposes to obesity and central adiposity over time. The compounded risk is especially acute in women who experienced multiple ACEs and smoke, as both pathways converge on stress physiology, impaired eating behavior, and fat distribution influenced by female-specific hormone male. Type and count of ACEs matter. Sexual and physical abuse and 4 or more ACEs carry particularly strong association with later obesity in women. Hormonal stated pre and versus postmenopausal women differ in sympathetic response and fat distribution, impacting how obesity risk manifests. That is in American Heart Association journals. Behavioral mediators, women with ACEs may adopt emotional eating, reduce sleep, or exercise avoidance, thereby predisposed to weight gain. Ethnic and culture modifiers, like in Hawaiian women study, BR associations varied by race ethnicity, suggesting culturally tailored intervention are essential. Type and dose of ACEs, other differentiator factors among females exposed to adverse childhood experiences and high risk in obesity. Dose-dependent risk meta-analysis confirms that experiencing 4 or more ACEs double the odds of adult obesity relative to zero exposure. Specific ACEs types, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and psychological abuse shows the specifically a strong association with obesity among women, whereas men showed weaker or non-significant association with physical and sexual abuse. Adolescence-focused studies similarly documented that girls exposed to more than ACEs, especially physical, sexual, and neglect, have substantially greater odds of childhood overweight or obesity. Leptin pathways also differ. Women, especially menopausal, have higher leptin production per unit fat, typically from subcutaneous depots, which may blunt obesity-driven sympathetic response, while postmenopausal shifts intensity metabolic hormonal impacts. In-depth evidence-based analysis of how obesity elevates sympathetic nervous system SNS tone in women with special attention to postmenopausal status, including cellular mechanisms, sex differences, clinical implications, all associated with overall increase in sympathetic nervous system activity, notably elevated muscle sympathetic nerve activity, muscle sympathetic nerve activity, or MSNA, and renal sympathetic nerve activity, RSNA, which contributes to hypertension and vascular dysfunction. Microneurography studies confirm that obese individuals show significant higher MSNA at rest than lean controls, particularly when visceral adipose tissue is elevated, even in the absence of hypertension. Weight loss reversed elevated MSNA, suggesting a causal role of adiposity in central nervous or sympathetic nervous system over activity. Sex and menopausal differences, premenopausal versus menopausal in women, in contrast to men. Obese menopausal women show minimal. Women show minimal to elevation in MSNA and heart rate with increased PMI or waist circumference. This relative sympathetic resistance or protection is attributed to subcutaneous fat predominance, lower visceral adiposity, and estrogen-mediated modulation of the sympathetic nervous system response, a hypersensitivity of leptin-induced sympathetic nervous attenuation requires a high estrogen state. With menopause, fat redistributes from subcutaneous to visceral depots, and estrogen level decline, leading to increased sympathetic tone in obesity, similar to patterns observed in men. The link between visceral fat and the sympathetic nervous system activation strengthens after menopause by MSNA and resting heart rate, becoming positively correlated with visceral adiposity in postmenopausal women. That is in a hypertension review by the American Heart Association Journal. Let us see once again. Insulin-triggered sympathetic nervous system increases are abolished in obese women compared to markedly enhanced in obese men. Obesity impairs the baroreflex sensitivity and heart rate variability, reflecting diminished parasympathetic modulation and elevated baseline of sympathetic nervous system tone. That is part of the circulation research. In premenopausal women, weight loss does not consistently reduce MSNA, likely due to their baseline of the sympathetic nervous system activity already being low and less PMI dependent. Sympathetic nervous system activity elevation appears strongly linked to visceral obesity and metabolic dysfunction. Sex differences show premenopausal women are generally protected from obesity-induced sympathetic nervous system activation, while postmenopausal women are vulnerable. Leptin and insulin stimulation for the sympathetic nervous system in male, but responses are blunted or abolished in obese females. Weight loss reverse MSNA increases in men, postmenopausal women, but not consistently in premenopausal women. Obesity elevates the sympathetic nervous system tone overall, especially when visceral obesity is high. Premenopausal obese women are relatively protected from sympathetic nervous system elevation, likely due to estrogen subcutaneous fat distribution and muted leptin insulin pathways. Postmenopausal women exhibit similar sympathetic nervous system activation pattern to men, with obesity consistently linked to elevated MSNA, heart rate, and increased cardiovascular risk. Recognizing these differences can inform gender and menopause-specific interventions, especially in trauma-exposed female population where stress and visceral fat intersect and obesity with obesity pathophysiology. Quantitative estimates of sympathetic nervous system activation via MSNA and heart rate variability, the threshold related to visceral adiposity in women, along with explanatory context. Direct quantitative studies showing like MSNA spikes per centimeter square visceral fat in women are sparse. However, finding consistently show that visceral adiposity strongly correlates with muscle sympathetic nerve activity MSNA in postmenopausal women and men, but not in premenopausal women. For whom MSNA remains relatively stable across BMI ranges, while precise MS spikes centimeter square values aren't valuable. One standard deviation increases in visceral fat among postmenopausal females typically correspond with significant elevation in MSNA comparable to those observed in obese men. Heart rate variability provides insight into autonomic balance. A higher LF and HF ratio suggests that sympathetic dominance, whereas higher RM, SSD, or HF power indicates stronger parasympathetic vagal tone. In overweight young females, heart rate variability studies show that increase in LF and and HF ratio reflecting sympathetic predominance, though in fully obese adolescents, LF may decrease, suggesting complex adaptation. Healthy average in young adult women in RMSSD roughly 30 to 60, MS, LF, and HF ratio 1.0 to 2. Obese women with high visceral fat often show RMSSD lower than 30, MS, HF power significantly depressed, and LF-HF ratio is lower than 2.03 and 3, indicative of sympathovagal imbalance or autonomic increased autonomic response or matrices. Insulin resistance and waist circumference can help identify women with high autonomic risk, especially if they have histories in ACEs or trauma exposure and obesity. So insulin resistance, biomarkers, and waist circumference measurement can be an indicator of high autonomic risk. I'm going to stop in this part, and that's explaining part of the mechanism so that the triad of smoking, ACEs, and obesity, oxidative stress, the pro-inflammatory cytokines, and the damage of the lipid tissue, and the proliferation of adipocytes. Increased risk. What are the biomarkers that indicates that they are at high risk of obesity, and it's metabolic? It is changes in or alteration in the cellular mechanisms and function. So therefore, we have to understand where is the rupture, occurred, and what drives the rupture. And then we can identify the mechanisms of the restorative or the repair mechanisms or strategies, or the best intervention based on age, gender, sex, race, ethnicity, and the history of trauma and the maladaptive behaviors. So I'm gonna and the lower vagal tone. That is essential. Lower vagal tone. I am gonna stop right here. I would like you to take something out of the conversation today or the talk today. It may help you to identify other factors that you would like to understand. You ask a question around. You create this context, and you go through scenarios and understand the mechanisms and the behaviors that drives this alteration or the aggravation of the inflammatory cytokines, the oxidative stress, and the excitotoxicity, the heightened excitotoxicity load, and the allostatic loads. I hope you get something out of this conversation. And once again, I would like to thank you for everything that I am allowed and have the courage to walk through the journey. I don't know what's next. However, I'm in a learning in progress, understanding a piece by piece, trying to connect the dots. But however, we presented so far, there are multiple factors: DNA methylation, inflammatory cytokines, biomarkers, oxidative stress, and that is what drives the metabolic dysfunction or dysregulation, the hypervigilance, and the disruption, the aggression, and activate the genetic predisposition. So epigenetic is the correlation or the interplay between the gene environment dynamic. So right now we understand we are not isolated. We would like to understand this ecological system of human condition, and from biopsychosocial, from other health behavior theories, from research, from practice, from clinical applications, from community outreach, from dissemination of the information through the designated channels of information dissemination. However, all I want is I want to share something with the public. It may be of use to somebody. I hope that somebody will benefit from this, and I hope others may visit and listen to this conversation again and go back to other videos and understand the part of what we mean about vulnerability, what we mean about subjective vulnerability, and how the behavior is being driven by other neurobiological, neuroendocrinological. From psychoneuroimmunology, a lot of other disciplines is looking at the human condition from molecular and cellular mechanism, and that what drives the behavior. That what we see, that what we and impact influence the state of the homeostasis or allostasis. No one is immune. Everybody had their own battles. They go through it. We would like to have grace, not judgmental. We stop this language of sharpness and judging people for what we see, because what you see is not exactly what is happening. It is a perception, perceived reality, perceived stress, and perceived threats. So look at your own biases, identify your own biases, identify your coping mechanism, your maladaptive behaviors. Um, uh, I don't want to say. I saw it all. I experienced it all at all levels. So I came to a point that I want to do something. That is what what drives me to do this conversation and started to. I never thought I'm gonna go like on social media on one day or something. I wrote, I communicated through social media, I wrote messages, I wrote my blog, and I created my blog during another weak point in my life that I want to understand why the body reacts this way. And when we understand that you are not only your gene, you are the toxic emotional load, that unresolved trauma, the unhealthy interpersonal relationships, and the trauma bleeding from collective individualistic. We are collecting information. We are receptors of trillions of information every single day. So, and your body keeps the scores. And everybody's trauma impact everyone. So if you are walking through the world with your package, this package is gonna throw stones on others. So you are not gonna see grace. You are not gonna see welcome, opening, embracing spirit. You are gonna be a very defensive, very combative, very hyper vigilant. Um, uh, it is, and if everybody's acting from the sympathetic response, it's not a good place to be. And if you see this is the normal of life, that's not God. He wanna wake you up. He wanna say, yeah, look at me, see my grace, see my endless grace and loving kindness to you. So embrace the person within you, embrace it. Have peace within you, that whatever challenge, whatever trials, whatever accumulation of unresolved, understood mysteries in your life, that is part that is inviting you to shift, to understand that this is impact you and this is eating the personal life. So it is not benefiting you, it is harming. So you turn it into a self-destructive tool to your own biosystems. So as if the perpetrator gave you the tool, say, I'm gonna watch you, that you're gonna be self-destructive. So that is not God. That is not what is meant for human beings. So we are standing in His grace. We understand His wonderful love to us, that we have to do what He wants us to do. Seek Him and you will find. So he will give you the understanding. Lean not on your understanding and seek his understanding. His understanding is way far than us. He presenting you with things so that you never fathom. How come I get to understand this or that? So he's a good God. Those who have healthy life, God bless you and continue to bless you and um, allow you to be the light for those who want to learn from you, for those who want to understand how to live a life with purpose and meaning and full of grace. I happy Saturday, and I wish you well, and I will continue part two. Yeah, never again. Peace.